this might turn to love. I think this might turn to love.
Yo, what up, doggies? Johnny Zuka was sitting here with Llyght Stevens.
What it do?
I gotta say right now, man, you do a lot of good work.
Thank
I've
you,
been
man.
following you since I met you, I think a couple years ago at Bocce Cellar, and ever since then, I've been, following you and liking your beats, to your beat battles, to your production, to your Sleeveless Heart EP.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then that's what led me to that, and I heard that CD, and that just like, wow, like, this dude got skills.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That was definitely an album that I no pun intended, poured my heart into. So
yeah. So what was the concept behind that EP?
I always wanted to do kind of like a quote unquote love themed album, but I didn't want it to be kind of generic or too mainstream. So I wanted to kind of incorporate more of the like boom bap elements of hip hop, but incorporate like a love content and hit different aspects and layers of it instead of just like trying to get a girl or the heartbreak of losing one. Like I try to kind of hit different segments of it and have it be something that like not only appealed to women but appealed to men who were also into hip hop or R&B and vice versa. So it was kind of my take at that. Man, I'm very influenced obviously by like 90s production, so I was like 80s and 90s kind of stuff, and that was actually the first song that I ironically enough recorded for the EP, and that was kind of the one that set in motion trying to do a project like that because I was really happy with the way that song came out, and it was more of like the single or the more mainstream style song from that project, and I kind of built around that actually. So
did you handle the majority of the production of that EP?
Actually, ironically enough, most of that production is either from like my best friend Packard Brown or like Wordsmith out of San Francisco, who works with a lot of the guys from Rec League and stuff. He was lucky enough to kind of bless me with some stuff and was super cool about it. And so it was one of the first projects I've ever done where primarily all the production wasn't mine. In fact, Turn to Love and I think one other one were the only ones that I did produce. Well, Questions actually was a Wordsmith production too.
Oh,
so
okay. Wasn't Business Casual another one that you did yourself?
That was actually a beat that I got online from another friend of mine, and that was like, I just did it on a whim, and like my buddy came down from Portland and we were like, oh, let's shoot a video, and we like had no plan for it. We just kind of like did it on a whim because he was down on the trip, and then the song kind of gained some momentum, and then I was like, well, I gotta do something with it and put it on the project.
So steady with the flow, live a fast life, put the pedal to the flow, now we ride out. You want a sideline player, call it timeouts. I'm about to love it again, boy, you find out. When it's all said and done, I'ma do it up big, kinda like dynamite, yeah, we blew it up. On a plane, try and fuck me and stew with us. You know I'ma go and get my shine till it's luminous.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because that's in between the, I think it's Turn to Love, and then there's another song that ends the EP. But one is Business Casual is like, it's number 7.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of trying to segment it in a way of like it'll wrap up the whole vibe of the album, but from 1 to 6 or whatever, because it was kind of a short EP, was all very content based, and I tried to arrange the songs so they told, like I said, different stories and stuff. So.
Was that inspired by anything, or it was just
like... I was starting to kind of get into a relationship at that time, and I hadn't been in a relationship in a while, so I was kind of, talking about the peaks and the valleys, per se, of that relationship. So it was very inspirational in terms of content, and it was good that I was kind of experiencing all of these different spectrums of relationships, because it made it really easy to write about different things instead of, like I said, trying to make something more generic or kind of mainstream about, the kind of typical concepts that people use in love songs per se. So
I feel as if as an artist you have to actually live through it in order for it to actually be more lively and more easier to record in the booth, because if you actually live it, it's a lot more easier for you to deliver it and it's more organic.
Exactly. It was a very genuine album for me in that regard, because pretty much, I mean, everything I'm saying in there is real and pertains to something in some facet that was going on in my life and my relationship at the time. So honestly, writing it was pretty easy in terms of just coming up with the ideas and kind of formatting the vibes of the songs. And obviously I got good production that really just, once I got the vibe of the song, it was easy to kind of tie that into whatever was going on, and it just really kind of came together pretty quickly, actually. So
now that was your last pure hip hop album, right?
Yeah, definitely. That was the last album. I've done a lot of hip hop songs and features and stuff since then, but my last hip hop project for sure.
And then you kind of seamlessly moved into another realm of music, though, right? You moved into like the EDM world, dubstep.
A little bit, yeah. Like not as much of the mainstream kind of EDM stuff, but like I definitely like kind of developed a passion for deep house or more kind of undergroundy, quote unquote, EDM styles. I like electronica, down tempo, kind of more of those like niche genres of electronic music. I was never like a techno guy. I'm not like a raver, you know. That wasn't really my scene. Mm-hmm. But there was definitely songs and certain styles of that have always kind of appealed to me. So it was more of an experiment than anything to see like, oh, like
I'll dick
around and have fun with it. And I had like a little bit of success on some things that I got some feedback on. So I was like, maybe I'll just try to grow on that. And obviously, like, you know, the whole EDM and dance music movement is kind of hot right now. So I'm not trying to capitalize on it in that sense. I'm kind of just trying to tie it into what I'm already good at or whatever I already feel and maybe put my own unique stamp on it. Until I really got deep into, you know, EDM style production, I didn't appreciate how difficult it is. Like, it is not easy because, you know, the cadences and things of that nature aren't necessarily as complex as hip hop, but the sound design is on like another level. You're talking about tons of automations, and you have to take something that doesn't necessarily have vocals in it and make it exciting and fluid for a long period of time. And that's not easy to do necessarily without vocals unless you're really adept at song arrangement and making sure that you're creating the feel that you want. And keeping that moving throughout the song. I gained a massive respect for EDM producers and DJs after that because I realized how much work goes into it. I mean, these guys spend like 6 weeks on one record trying to fine tune it and get the mix right and fix all the little things to make it, you know, exciting basically from beginning to end. And it's hard, man. I'm not gonna lie. But definitely having a hip hop background in terms of beat making certainly accelerated the process because I definitely use that as my inspiration. I'm still very hip hop influenced, so that'd probably be the best way I could describe it. It was very different in that regard, as I kind of went into it trying to be, you know, like I want to do my best to somewhat emulate what's already out there, so I can kind of see where I fit in or how I match up. But doing that is actually probably even more difficult because I've already kind of created my own workflow and style. So I just try to incorporate the two and have it be as, you know, cohesive as possible.
Now you're starting to do beat sets, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to get more into that. You know, you see me at beat battles and stuff, so I've done the beat battle thing. Now beat sets are kind of taking off with these people who are like, you know, big name producers and are making a name for themselves but aren't necessarily DJs, they're not necessarily MCs, so they have to have some sort of a way to essentially perform their talent without just putting out records, essentially.
Yeah.
So once that kind of started to develop, I started to see that as like, okay, that's maybe a field that I could enter or you know, put myself into and see how I not only, again, match up with other producers, but how can I make my sets more creative? How can I make a show entertaining without having to rock a mic, you know what I mean? Or without coming with, you know, beat battle beats and going, you know, head to head with somebody and, you know, gauging crowd reaction on what's better. It's keeping the party moving like a DJ without having to scratch records or, you know, blend songs together.
Random question. How'd you come up with Llyght Stevens, my man?
That's a funny story, actually. I've definitely had multiple artist names in my time. I used to go by Design with a Z. That was like one of my first names. And then I actually went by Jetson for something more. Yes, I got a problem, me, Jetson. Originally, when I was recording Solar Systematic, that was still my name. It was Jetsyn. And I just recently moved up to Portland, and there was an artist up there who was literally called Elroy Jetson, and it was spelled differently, but he's like from the area, and people know who he was, and I was like, man, like I don't know if I can really kind of get a foothold in the industry out here if I'm using the same name. So I was like, I need to come up with something different. And I wanted to do something that wasn't necessarily just hip-hop influences. Like I kind of wanted to sound like a real name, so no matter what type of music I'm doing, it's somehow feasible. And I couldn't think of anything, and my best friend Packard Brown came up with something, and something Stevens, and I was like, okay, I like the last name Stevens, but I couldn't think of like a good first name that wasn't like a generic name. And then he said Llyght, and I was like, I don't know. I was really on the fence about it, and I kind of rolled with it for a week just to see how it felt. And for some reason, it kind of like caught on with people, and then it grew on me from that, and then it just kind of went from there. And then of course I wanted to spell it different, so the way I spell it is theoretically it's I guess back in like the 13 or the 1400s, that's how they spelled light, and it was like lampposts and stuff like that. So it was kind of weird, but I tied it together, and I wanted something too that like when you Googled it, nothing else would come up except my content. So it worked out good in both realms in that regard. So it literally happened on a whim, randomly, just trying to think of something somewhat universal, I guess.
Right, Llyght Stevens. Yeah, that sounds good on a poster right there. Boom.
pretty much. And like I said, I was like really skeptical at first, but it really grew on me for whatever reason. I was like, well, it must be meant to be then, if that's the case. So
how was the reception out there in Portland?
It was good, man. It was cool. Like people liked it. It's definitely like any arena, especially like Santa Cruz. It's very hard when you have a very tight-knit community of both artists and culture in general. So making your way into that is definitely difficult and time-consuming. But if you're creating your own niche, you're putting in the work, and obviously the product itself, speaks well, then you can work your way in. And it's not easy, but it's good to kind of do that too, because then you feel like you can go anywhere and feel like you can kind of prove yourself. Stuff. I was originally born around here in the Sacramento area, and I lived out here until I was about 12, and then I moved out to San Jose, but like a week before my freshman year in high school, and I lived out there for like 10 years. So I kind of rep San Jose because that's where I really started to do music and kind of make a name for myself in music per se, and all my friends and most of my network is out there.
So what are your musical influences? Where do they range from?
Man, so many. I mean, obviously hip-hop is my main influence. Like, growing up as an MC, as cliche as it sounds, Eminem was, the person who kind of pushed me into getting into MCing. But once I really started to dive farther into rap, I started to, align with guys like Nas and even like a Cannabis, like really lyrical storyteller type MCs. And that started to kind of like this catalyst effect in terms of what was influencing me musically. And then I really started to get into music more, not just rapping or lyricism, because I've always been a writer, but I've always loved music. I just didn't understand it. So once I started to really like craft records more and listen to music and kind of absorb all of the different layers of it, it started from hip-hop, but then I really grew an appreciation for the other genres. So I'm actually very heavily influenced by R&B, and obviously R&B and hip-hop, are kind of parallel, one and the same in a lot of ways. So it really just grew from there.
How'd you link up with McLean?
McLean, actually, I had met through my buddy Cume from Rec League as well. I met up with him and Pro. We'd like done a couple of shows together or seen each other at shows, and then I produced a remix for Cume and McLean's album for Finish the Cup. And then I did a show at Zelda's actually in Capitola, and after I had made the remix, I basically like called him up and was like, hey, I want to perform this song, you want to come out and do it with me? And he was like, yeah, totally. So he came out, we did the show, like we chopped it up, we kind of had a good rapport from there, and then we really just started kind of like building a relationship like creatively from there and working together. And I did that beat battle over at the Blue Lagoon, and he just randomly he came out like to support, and I was like, that's hella cool. And he's like one of the people I respect most musically. Like, dude, honestly, in a lot of ways is like a genius. He's very, very adept at knowing what sounds good, and we have very kind of similar passions and inspirations musically.
Thinking about all the times I shouldn't burn. 'Cause I've hurt myself, I've hurt my friends, I've made mistakes. But I learned. And it feels like the devil's knocking at my door.
Now that song, The Devil's Knocking on My Door, was the inspiration behind that?
Ironically enough, I was talking to him and I was trying to get a record going with him, and I was trying to find some beats for him. I was like, what kind of like style are you looking for? And randomly out of nowhere, he was like, I kind of am into Chance the Rapper beats right now. And like literally 3 days before that, I started working on a beat that had like 4 instruments, and I named it Chance the Rapper style beat. And I'm like, I got something that might work for you. And it was like a very kind of skeleton version of it. I sent him off the stems for it, and he had an idea for it and kind of sent me off a rough, and I was like, this is fucking amazing. So honestly, I kind of created the foundation for the song, but a lot of the credit really goes to him, because obviously he did the vocals and wrote the song, and he did a lot of the post-production on it and just made it an amazing record. It's honestly probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite record I've ever been a part of. I almost couldn't believe I was like a part of that. It totally caught me off guard in a good way, because I've always known McLean could sing a little bit, and he was a dope beat maker and a super dope MC, but when I heard him sing on it, I was just like, damn, like this dude is dope, like super, super talented. And the vibe was perfect. He put his own little stamp on it, and I'm like, I kind of was already progressing towards that style of music and not just doing, you know, directly hip hop. Mm-hmm. And that was really the catalyst that made me go like, okay, like this is what I want to do. Like these are the type of songs that I want to make. So I honestly, I was amazed. I was actually sitting downstairs in this house with my girlfriend when he sent me the file, and I started playing it, and I was just like, this is amazing. And she loved it, and everybody that I played it for was like really, really supportive. So I was like, this is awesome.
That was a good song too, man.
Thanks, man.
He
killed it, dude. He killed it. We're working on some other collaboration projects right now, like Pro again from Rec League, who's a good friend of McLean's. I got like a rock style actually song that we're kind of working on together. So I've been producing with him, and me and McLean have been going back and forth with files. So they got a project coming out that I'm a part of, and me and him are kind of slowly starting to put together some more collaborations too. So yeah, he's like one of my favorite people to work with. So.
And what are you operating on when you're making beats?
Man, I just use Fruity Loops. When I got into production, it was all about hardware. I had an MPC 60, then I had another MPC, I had a Roland MV8000, and I ended up selling off my gear when I moved back down to California, and I somehow had gotten a hold of a Fruity Loops copy. And I had no intention of using it really for production. I was just like, I'll just play around with this until I get another piece of equipment. And I started to kind of learn it more and figure out what it was capable of. Obviously, Ninth Wonder is a big Fruity Loops advocate. Mm-hmm. So once I kind of learned what it was capable of, and obviously production in general started to become much more software oriented than just primarily hardware, I just took it and ran with it, and it just became like the back of my hand in terms of the feeling and my workflow. It was so much quicker than having to import samples into, you know, beat machines and stuff like that. So it kind of happened by accident.
You know, he's got a nice little setup right here. You know, you're not all extravagant. This whole thing is not covered up in styrofoam.
It will be hopefully soon. I need to get it into a better place, but it does the job for now, and I can fix whatever errors it usually has in there. So I'll make it work.
Do you have to like when you record? Do you need to have like a styrofoam on top of it so it can block the sound coming out, or is that just like?
It's really, I don't know. It really depends on the room. It's not necessarily as much about the soundproofing as it is about the room and directionally speaking where you're recording into. So some instances yes, some instances no. You know.
Okay. Now, you know, I want to get back on topic. So I want to ask you, what's the difference between a beat maker and a producer?
Whew, man. I kind of look at it in a similar scope as, you know, people making the comparison between what's the difference between an MC and a rapper, you know what I mean? Essentially, you're kind of doing the same action, but they tell two different stories, where a lot of people make the argument, you know, MCs are talking about real shit and come off the dome and stuff like that, and rappers are just writing, you know, words basically that rhyme together with the intention of making a cool record per se. I look at production similarly, and beat makers really, I guess in my opinion, and that's not to take away from any of them, really concentrate on just making a dope beat and, you know, having their 808 hit and all of that kind of stuff, and trying to get it off to a rapper who can put their own, you know, creative style onto it. Whereas a producer, I think, has a bit of a more grander vision of where they want to take the record in terms of, you know, how arrangement's going to be, like a very specific vibe or style that they want to attribute or you know, basically give to the artist. Like a producer, for the most part, to me, works with artists that that are cohesive with their style or can accentuate their style, whereas beat makers are just trying to make the dopest thing that they can make and, you know, try to get a rapper on it. And again, that's not to take away from either. They both have their appeals. So for me, being a producer, like especially now when I make beats, I'm never really just thinking about, you know, the kick and the drum and making something that sounds dope. I'm thinking about from start to finish where I want the record to go, how I want you to feel when you hear it, you know, the content of the song, all of those little dynamics and layers that you may not necessarily think about when you're just going in the mode and trying to like bang out something dope, you know?
You know, because Just Blaze, I recently said, you know, there is a difference between a beat maker and a producer. Beat makers just make beats, and a producer actually produces a song.
Yes, exactly, and that
You know?
ties into pretty much what I was saying. I completely agree, because a beat maker, you know, a lot of beat makers who make sick-ass beats don't necessarily know how to take that beat and the rapper's verse or whatever and translate that into like a hit record or a great song. And some people who aren't necessarily the greatest beat makers, for example, even like a sound engineer, can still be a producer because they know what the song needs arrangement-wise or what needs to be highlighted to make it the most appealing and to make it the most, you know, attractive to the listener per se. So that's kind of how I separate the two, I guess, per se. And it's the same thing with an MC and a rapper. I mean, to me, there's a stigma attached with being a rapper. Like, everyone wants to be an MC, nobody wants to be a rapper. But a rapper still has MC skills. You still have to rhyme words. You still have to say something in a way that people are going to connect to. So that's really what it's all about. And beat makers can do the same thing, but forming a song from start to finish is a whole different task than just banging out something that sounds cool. You know what I mean?
I kind of disagree with the rapper because I feel as, you know, when an MC, he's a master of his whole craft. You know, he's got stage presence, he's got delivery, he got flow, he got metaphors. He's got the 5 techniques to be an MC, whereas a rapper, he's only got maybe 2 out of the 3.
I can agree with that. I guess you could put that comparison into like sports. You're talking about baseball players. You're talking about 5-tool players, the guys who can, you know, hit, throw, catch, play defense, do all that kind of stuff, and then you have other guys who can only hit or can only play defense.
Yeah.
But they all still have their own appeal, and they all can still play a position in the grand scheme of what you're trying to achieve. So again, I don't take away from either of them, even though I do differentiate them, because I definitely feel like, again, they all have their own individual appeal, and at the end of the day, it's kind of a common goal. Like, an MC still creating songs, you know, and making records. But I do agree with what you're saying in terms of what differentiates an MC is kind of having that total package.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
And then, you know, my final thoughts, producer. Do you consider yourself as a producer or as a beat maker?
I consider myself a producer because, again, I like to craft songs basically from the ground up now, and I've tried to dive into different, you know, genres of music, not only to challenge myself but to inspire myself in different ways, so I'm not kind of tunnel visioned on one particular vibe or genre that kind of defines me. To me,
Llyght Stevens, Llyght Stevens. Get checked. Oh, hey.
Change positions. Stroke it for me. Stroke it, baby. Stroke it, baby. Work it, baby. Work it, baby. Stroke it, baby. Work it, baby. Work it, baby. Ooh, baby, I love your stroke. Cause you get me where I'm going. And show you get my float. Cause I know just what you do.
Alright, we'll be right back. My cameraman's over here waving at me, telling me I need to cut this out. So we'll be right back.
Cameraman.
I gotta keep it consistent.
we don't want people to know that we're using multiples.
Right? And you're still gonna be credited for the shoot. I mean, come on now.